Of great content today, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Better Together webinar, DEI and Strategic Communication, presented by the University of Oregon School of Journalism and Communication in Portland. SOJC in Portland offers immersive graduate programs in strategic communication and multimedia journalism to advance one's career in strategic and visual storytelling to stand out in these evolving fields. Our very own Assistant Professor of Immersive Media Psychology, Danny Pimentel, and Strategic Communication Master's student, Olivia Chuck, will be moderating this excellent conversation. So I will turn it over to Danny and Olivia.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Appreciate it. And welcome everybody out there. Thank you for joining us today. Really excited about this talk. Like Jessica said, my name is Daniel Pimentel, Assistant Professor of Immersive Media Psychology here at the University of Oregon School of Journalism and Communication. And I am honored to be hosting today's panel alongside Olivia Chalk, who's an SOJC StratCom student here in Portland. So I'm going to kick off today's panel, and Olivia and I will sort of help pose some questions and get the discussion going. And like Jessica said, we encourage you to really be active in the chat. If you have questions, make sure you use the question feature there too. Let us know your thoughts, anything that pops in your head as we're sort of engaging in the discussion. Do not be shy. This is the time to engage. But before I introduce our awesome panelists, Carlos and Diana, I see you out there, backstage waiting for it to pop off. Before we learn about how they're sort of creating more equitable and inclusive industries out there, let's get to know where you all are from in your, where you are in your DEI journey. So we're gonna go up and throw some few questions on the Zoom poll. They should pop up relatively soon. Yep, they should be popping up now. There are 4 questions. Go ahead and take a couple seconds and answer them, right? You're going to see the first one will be, which industry are you in? Which describes the field that you're currently in, right? Are you in advertising, PR, journalism? Let us know. We want to know what field you're in so that we can, in some ways, tailor what we're talking about to better suit your needs. Second question you'll see is defining DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion. What does it mean to you? Do you really know what it is? Are you considering yourself an expert, or are you just now being introduced to the concept? It's a safe space, so be honest. That's the main part, right? We want to have a candid conversation about these things. So let us know where you are in that regard. Third question, which of the following do you hope to learn most about this panel, right? What do you, some of you already typed in the chat what you're looking forward to gaining out of this panel discussion. So that's good to see that you're already coming in here with, strategic takeaways that you can extract from here and apply to your day-to-day work. And then the last question should be, which of the following have you done in the past year, right? So have you engaged in workshops? Have you had those uncomfortable, perhaps, discussions in your home, right? Are you, engaging in any DE&I readings that you're particularly fond of? Which, by the way, if you do have some readings that you like and that you found particularly helpful on your journey, drop those in the chat. Share the resources. Sharing is caring, as they say. So we're going to let those polls breathe for another 15 seconds or so. And let's see what you all think. It says, I cannot vote, although I do want to. And again, I'm really personally excited about this panel. I think this topic is obviously very important. And, sometimes we get asked, what is DE&I, related to the second question. I don't know about you, but oftentimes I like to use a metaphor, right? So I like to think of our organizations as a dance sometimes, right? And diversity can be where everyone is invited to the party. Equity can be where everyone can contribute to the playlist. And then inclusion can be everyone has the opportunity to dance. Sometimes that helps me sort of grasp the concept. So let's see, we got the results in. So a lot of you are PR. Education, 30% or so, and 30% are other. In terms of defining DE&I, we see the majority understand the concept broadly, and 38% understand each of those components pretty well. So a good variety there. Let's see what else. My mouse is frozen. Can't scroll down, so I can't see the results. I don't know if Olivia, if you can see the results.
Yeah,
sorry.
for sure.
The other
so question
two?
3, looks like for question 3, which of the following do you hope to learn more about? It looks like we have about 81% looking to learn more strategies for implementing as well as the second runner-up, or actually tie up, awareness of DEI initiatives in the industry, and becoming ally in DEI spaces, as well as measuring the impacts of DEI initiatives. So those were tie.
Awesome.
All a tie.
Thank you.
And then, yeah, you got control back.
No, you can get.
Okay, cool. And then number 4, our last question: which of the following have you done over the past year involving DEI? It looks like there's a tie between 88% for watched or attended DEI talks like this one, or have read material. And then we have an overwhelming 94% saying I've had informal discussions about DEI. And it looks like number 4 is a really, really high response rate. So great.
Awesome. Love it. Love it. And also love all the resources being shared in the chat. So make sure you check those out. So now we got to know you all a little bit. Let me introduce our esteemed guests, our panelists. On my virtual left, I'll start in that way. On my virtual left, I have Carlos Sanchez, who is currently Associate Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Starcom in Chicago. Carlos leads Publicis Group's Men of Color Alliance, known as MOCA, also, which is meant to increase the visibility and participation of people of color in the marketing and communications industry. Carlos, welcome, my friend. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, sir. Super excited to be here with you guys.
We are incredibly excited to have you here as well. And on my virtual right, we have Diana Falcon Coaster. Thank you so much for being here, Diana. She recently shifted from creating market strategies for Disney advertising sales to now where she serves as Manager of Talent, Mobility, and Development at ESPN, the worldwide leader in sports, in Los Angeles. There, she helps create growth and development opportunities for underrepresented groups within the organization, among many other things. Welcome, Diana. Thank you so much for being here.
Gracias, amigo. Love you, Danny. Thank you for having me.
Placer. So happy to have both of you here and glad to see you all are doing well. We had a little chat behind the scenes and all of us are really amped for this discussion. So before Olivia and I start picking your brain on some of these topics, I want to start off with just a brief introduction, get everyone up to speed in a sense, right? This week, a friend of mine actually, who also works in this DEI space, told me straight up, as a society, we sort of need to prioritize having DE&I conversations that feel, as he put it, ordinary. And I'm hoping to some degree this can be that, right? To have a candid discussion about the issues, what needs to be done, and how we both individually and collectively can play a role in transforming our industry, right? Because, whether we're on the creative side, we saw the breakdown of our participants today, pretty diverse in terms of the field, whether you're on management and HR, we want and we recognize that our industry needs transformation inside and out. And that's what both of you are doing, right? Externally, we know brands often fail to connect with particular audiences, right? Whether it's through poor representation, through poor messaging, insensitivity. As consumers, we're more and more demanding more from our brands, right? In terms of how their products and stories connect and resonate with us. And then internally, we see the same thing, right? Look at what happened at Apple this week. We're demanding more from brands at an institutional level. What does your leadership look like? What does it sound like? How are you infusing DE&I into your hiring practices, employee development, so on and so forth? And in fact, shameless plug to our wonderful faculty and students here, our students created the Advertising Diversity Database, surveyed over 1,700 US agencies and supported that, found that glaring disparities in terms of gender and racial breakdown. And so all this is to say, we have a lot of work to do, but you all are doing some of that work, very important work, and you're serving as examples. And that's why I'm so excited to have both of you here, because you're on the ground putting in the work, right? And we have many entry-level marketers, whether they're BIPOC or aspiring allies, they're starting to sort of carve their own path. And so with that being said, let's look at both of you, right? And what factors came into play to make DE&I such a definitive part of your career and your lives, right? So I guess my first question, the way I'm framing it is, can you all describe why you chose to focus on DE&I in your work? Why is DE&I important to you? And why do you feel it's imperative for our industry to embrace it both conceptually, right, and strategically? And I don't know who wants to tackle this first. I saw Carlos, Mike, you get the buzzer, you get the Jeopardy buzzer.
Well, want to say I'm super happy to be here with Diana and talking about this amazing piece of multiple industries, but ultimately this kind of societal transformation. So super happy to be here again. In terms of kind of what motivated me to make this transition, to take a giant step backwards, I've been in the advertising industry for quite some time now. I got my start on the tech side, and have been on the agency side for the better half of about 7 years now. At this point, in my career, having been able to see media executions, campaign implementation and strategic targeting and all of these kind of robust, technically sound things driven by data be brought to market into client and particularly consumer facing opportunities. First thing that kind of caught my eye was this lack of representation in the data in of itself, this lack of quantification in people who we considered non-majority, albeit collectively they are now the majority. And during that time, being in places in which these decisions that are being made on behalf of what's coming into the media landscape to face consumers are decisions that are made by people who aren't necessarily representative of our communal experience here in this country. What really drove me to action upon this was being one of one and kind of having to advocate on behalf of many groups of which I'm not necessarily identifying as a member of, but recognizing that there was a lack of representation. So keeping my media hat on and continuing to push for this as it relates to media specific outputs, it begged the question of what are we doing to correct our industry, right? If we're thinking about how we're engaging consumers, how we internally, realigning ourselves. I got at Starcom in Publicis Group and started to immediately notice the difference in the way that that's approached internally as to specifically relates to their talent. That's what we call business resource groups or BRGs. I immediately got, connected with these folks, spent a lot of time building. Essentially, I built a BRG from the ground up, and now leading this organization, which has over 700 people as members globally. So it really has taken on a life of its own. And at that point in time, I decided, you know what? This is resonating with our talent. We need to make sure that this is an opportunity that stays consistently focused and prioritized in all aspects of both client-facing media and internal-facing programs. So at that point in time, I kind of took the bull by the horns and created the first ever diversity and inclusion role specific to Starcom in its 20-year history. I essentially wrote my own job title and my own job description and had to go to pitch it to the CFO and the CEO at the time, and was able to sell that whole value prop in. And that's how I made the commitment to this space.
I love it, Carlos, man. There's so much to unpack there. And a lot of it, like you mentioned, is need-based. There was this need for this focus. It's almost like you didn't get a chance to choose it. You did it necessity-wise, and that ultimately led to so many things. I love, the resource group that you built, all these things, initiatives that we're going to dig in deeper later on in the panel. But thank you for that sort of anecdote there. Diana, do you want to jump in as well?
Carlos, my friend, loves seeing the work that you're doing. So, Danny up top talked about what DE&I stands for related to music and dance, because I don't know if you guys know this, but Danny and I went to college. He used to be a college DJ just for fun on the weekends. So I love seeing that as a through line as he jumps into his professional career. But thinking back to what Danny said, what the D, the E, and the I stand for, my favorite letter in that is the I. It's the inclusion piece. And it's this concept of what I like to, it's like my buzzword I bring in everywhere, but the concept of diversity of thought. And the value in that I've seen in my career, in the 10 years since I graduated, I've built a lot of communities. I'm a community builder. I love building comunidad, bringing people together. I'm a connector at heart. And when you bring people, not just from different backgrounds, but with different career paths and passion, it's limitless what comes out of those communities. Right. And I am extremely passionate about seeing people reach what that infinite mindset means for them versus, I don't know if anybody here follows Simon Sinek, but he talks a lot about finite versus infinite mindset. And I think finite, when you think about your career or a DE&I strategy, if you're just doing it to check the box and say you did X, that's finite.
Right.
Infinite is this constant loop of growth of like, you can't win your career, right? It's a constantly evolving new metric, right? You could define what growth means to you and how you want to get there. But this unlocking people's potential, and people really all they want is a place where they can belong and they feel valued and they feel heard and they can bring great ideas to the table. And in seeing the communities that I've built and the diversity of thought that comes out of it, that unlocks business expansion, that unlocks revenue, that unlocks culture in a company, how we get after our corporate social responsibility efforts. And now you start connecting the dots to, you know, your company's strategic priorities. So like for Disney, we're the Walt Disney Company, but I work for ESPN inside the HR team for learning and development. So I have 4 tiers of goals to get after. So I'm a connector, and all the projects that I do intertwine to the objectives across all of my levels of the organization and our DE&I strategic pillars, et cetera. So I saw on one of the comments or polls, like a lot of people were trying to figure out how to implement DE&I strategies. So if I can give you any inspiration from my DE&I journey, it's to create community with diversity of thought, invest in your people, and let the ideas just flourish as you bring those people together and create a really truly inclusive environment. Because you just like going like this to the air and just be like, well, we'll just do this. Like,
Right.
Again, it's a check the box. People are going to see it's not authentic. Make it grassroots, bring it from the bottom up, and it'll be a game changer for your company.
And that's why I kind of like this. I found it interesting, right? When Carlos said, you had to pitch, you have to essentially pitch this, because to so many people, that connection point between what DE&I is, how it can manifest itself in ROI is something that many people might overlook, might not understand. And so both of you have done a good job in terms of internally within your organizations, being able to connect those dots, make it a no-brainer, go beyond just a buzzword that, it feels good to say, feels good to, back, but what are you actually doing on the ground strategically to implement it across your organization? So, and maybe that's where we should, pivot to, right? Olivia, I don't know if you want to chime in, but.
I do. We're just getting started. And I know that based on the poll questions, as Dana was saying, thinking about how to implement strategies and kind of create that action, because I think for the last couple of years, the trend is to talk about DEI, but we don't talk about DEI in action enough. And so my question for both of you is, what are some of the things that you've done in your roles, or even outside of, Walt Disney and Starcom, that involve putting DEI in action? And what does it look like to create something like MoCA, or like all the initiatives you have created so far, Diana? I'll popcorn it to actually Diana first, since Carlos went first last time.
Yeah, I think that it's really easy to like walk, but like walk and talk, right? Like actually prove that you're investing into something and what that looks like long term. That's a commitment, right? And I think what's happening right now in the DE&I space when it comes to action is that after the year we've had with racial reckoning and everything, really changing inside out for us as a country, and then us as, corporate companies having to step up, not just policies, but like everything, right? Everything is changing internally in real time at so many companies right now. I think people are, I'm sensing a trend that people are like, well, I'll just follow versus lead, because they're scared to do the wrong thing. And I think I like this concept of aspiring allyship, because I might be a Latina woman, right? So I have 2 dimensions of diversity, but my sister is gay, my best friend has a disability and kids with disabilities, right? Then you start intertwining your life and thinking about how those dimensions apply to you. That's a very personal journey. So then bringing that into the workplace and making it action oriented and business specific feels like this matrix we're not used to. So I think it's important to compartmentalize what DE&I means to you, which we started up top with, what you want to be invested in, because there's a ton of work to do. So if you're going to put in the work, be passionate about it, to get to the results that you want to get to. So I'll give you three examples of things that I've done in various organizations to date. One is business impact, so driven. So at ESPN, we have a priority to expand audiences to women's sports, right? You've seen everything going on with women's sports. It's blowing up. Tonight, we're dropping the 144 documentary on ESPN about the WNBA and the women and the 144 women in the bubble. It's bomb. Check it out. And I had the opportunity to go to an event, and one of the WNBA players said, "Have any of you gone to a game?" And like 3 people raised their hand. And she's like, "Well, don't say you don't like it until you try it." So then I went online, our employee portal, to get discounts, because Disney has discounts to like all sports since, you know, we're ESPN. And there wasn't any women's sports discounts available to employees. So then I did a write-up, Carlos, like you did, pointed out how we could do it, how we can fix it, and we built it. And now there was women's sports discounts available to all employees across the company. That was something driven by a woman at Disney, Women'sburg, but also helped advance our efforts as a company for audience expansion, tying back to those strategic priorities and strategies. From a culture perspective, I've launched at this point 4 bergs across 2 enterprises, both in the women and Latinx dimensions. I think to date, I've hosted 500 plus events in that 10-year career across a whole slew of topics. I would say with Mas Plus, which is our Latinx dimension at the Walt Disney Company, it's been very focused on community and service and creating more education around the buying power of the Latinx community and how we can expand Disney's products and services to Latinx audiences. And then on the women at Disney side, we've kind of created this entire grassroots culture of talent mobility. And the Walt Disney Company is so big, right? You could have an entire career going from ABC to Nat Geo to Hulu to Disney Plus to ESPN, working for the NHL or the NBA or the WNBA. Like there's just so much, and we hire everything from the janitor to the CEO across film, parks, right? So we're creating this culture to allow for development and equity and access to opportunity to move laterally, move like this when it comes to your career, leveraging your transferable skills. So one of our initiatives for women at Disney is navigating the career jungle gym at Disney. So for Women's History Month, for the last couple years, we've done a ton of programming around mobility by doing worksheets and roadmaps and Slack chats, but also like hosting personal branding workshops. How do you reinvent yourself and leverage your transferable skills and market yourself to get after those opportunities without having experience? We've done goal setting workshops. We've done, my favorite thus far is career pathways exploration. So we hosted a Zoom. We invited people from all different careers at Disney, from Hulu marketing to sales in Europe, to the 2 women who launched Shop Disney for Latin America in Mexico, e-commerce for our LATAM region. And we did 9 Zoom breakout rooms. People broke up into them and they got to shadow them for 45 minutes and see what that career actually is. Because when you read a job description, you still don't know what the job is. So actually seeing what it was, that unlocked people to think differently, right? You get exposed to something. That's the diversity in it. You get exposed to something you didn't even know was a thing. Now you're interested, you want to learn about it, develop the skills and go after it. So we've done a whole talent mobility lens there. And then the last piece that I'll say is something that's pretty new. And I haven't really seen much before, and I'm starting to talk with a lot of colleagues, and a lot of companies don't have these resources aggregated just yet, but this concept of allyship. Because again, I think before, I used to be very focused on women Latinx, right? Those are the ones I identified with, but now I'm learning all these things that I should be doing for content inclusivity through accessibility, inspired by Microsoft, because disabilities is 1 out of 4 people in the US and 1 out of 10 people in the US have a disability. Like it's such a huge population. We don't know it because they might not show it physically. So like immersing yourself in these different communities and then thinking about how they all come together we started a group called the Walt Disney Company Business Employee Resource Group's Allyship Committee. So the way we're operationalizing it, because we're all busy, is that every quarter, one person from each dimension of diversity across the Walt Disney Companies, it's about 13 of us, are in a committee. And then every quarter, every 6 months, we rotate new people in, so there's fresh perspectives, and we're creating an entire slew of allyship Slack emojis, allyship blog post, allyship challenges, assessments, etc., and marketing all this leading up to a big D&I summit that we're hosting internally. So again, none of that existed, but a lot of us saw the need, came together, started co-creating, and now we're doing that out. So in the action space, as you think about these things and you get inspired by some of the work that or a spark to think about something differently from Carlos and I today, the intersectionality of what you do in your DE&I plans is crucial. So if you keep the group siloed, yes, there's importance for brave space conversations at that level, but then as you go higher in the funnel and thinking about how to tie it back to business impact, the intersection of different dimensions unlocks new thinking, and it I think you'll level up your game faster than you think. Olivia,
Such a great example.
That was helpful.
No, it was incredibly helpful. So many examples there, you know, from just this idea of compartmentalizing DE&I, what it means to you, and sort of this idea that it's obviously multidimensional, but can mean different things, especially if you're in such a large organization. I love some of the approaches and strategies you like, the DE&I summit, and how you're integrating blog posts, Slack emojis, all those things, just really cool stuff happening there internally. And so I know, Carlos, you're approaching it, you're attacking it from a similar perspective, although obviously looking at different constituents in some degrees, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So one, just want to give a huge round of applause to all of her work, and definitely can attest to being able to see all of that, you know, and from a parallel view, and can just only imagine the amount of work that Deanna put into that. So definitely want to just give a shout out to her and all that tremendous amount of work. In terms of the ability to kind of take a different approach, I'm going to highlight a couple of different areas that are all interconnected. And so first of which, as it relates to putting into practice DE&I principles and DE&I, tactics, for lack of better words, I built and have led what we are calling our Belonging Advisory Board, which is a STARCOM specific entity in which I'm responsible for leading 16 leaders from all different levels, going all the way up from the CEO to our CTO, as well as our Chief Client Officer. So I'm leading C-suite level folks, as well as other directors, associate directors, people who are not necessarily even executives, right? And the concept for this organization is to strategize on how to interweave belonging into all fabrics of our business. And what that means is addressing and identifying intersectionality. And the first place in which I can talk about how this has come into fruition is in what Diana was kind of alluding to, which is brave space conversations. So in lieu of what has been happening all throughout this last year, there's a ton of crazy things that have taken place. But I want to say that the formation of this organization, this Belonging Advisory Board, actually took place in 2019. So we kicked this off pre-COVID, pre-everything. So we have already kind of got the juices flowing, got everything rolling. Obviously, COVID has changed the way we interact, but as it relates to specific opportunities to engage with brave space conversations, it's become all the more challenging to do that in a virtual environment. So I'll give you an example of something that we did and put into practice. Obviously, all things considered with the George Floyd trial, that of Officer Chauvin, was all happening in real time. We didn't know exactly how it was going to play out. We didn't know exactly how the verdict was going to take place. But what we decided to do was construct a brave space conversation in which over 60% of our U.S. population of employees attended. So this was about 600 some odd people. We did this at the drop of a dime, especially once we realized that the verdict was imminent. So what we did is we had 2 sessions back to back. We did an entirely new format in which we asked folks to do some homework and answer 2 simple questions. The questions were, I am a non-majority impacted member of society. I think support looks like this, fill in the blank. Then conversely, we had, I am not a non-majority member of society, and I think support may look like this. What we did is we had this pre-read coming into a conversation. We hit our Zoom meeting limit, so there was 500 per session. And essentially what we had to do was have this conversation. So at the drop of a dime, I constructed this format, developed an entire agenda which talked about allyship specifically. So the name of the program was Allyship, a brave space on impact versus intent. And that's the thing that we need to talk about, the difference between impact versus intent. Because just because you intended to do something well doesn't mean you did. And how that was received can have a positive or negative effect on your population. So what we decided to do with this conversation was walk people through the journey and continuum of what allyship looks like. Using the pyramid of accountability, we started with active allyship to accomplice to co-creator. And we gave examples of all of these respondents who decided to say what they thought it looked like versus what other people wanted it to look like in the way of support, and volleyed these in a real life conversation to explain and walk through how you can be a better ally in real time. We did this 2 days in a row because we had too many attendees. And in actuality, what it really worked and aligned into was the day of the verdict that came out. We were basically starting it right when they had released, hey, it's going to come out any moment. So at that point in time, I had to be agile, nimble, and co-create, right? And say, hey, what do the 500 of us want to do in real time? I asked a simple question, 3 answers. 1, do you want to continue regardless of us knowing what the verdict is? 2, do you want us to stop the content and specifically talk about the verdict? Or 3, do you want to cancel this event completely and all of us take our own time? Everybody opted for number 2. Luckily for us, in the way of being able to get through the content and explain allyship, we didn't have the verdict released during the time of the session. But that's just a real way to talk about what allyship looks like, move people through that continuum. You know, as Diana mentioned, it is a journey and not everyone's in the same place. And intersectionality is an important key to understand it. And what we were trying to do with this is essentially prepare everyone to have a tough conversation, embrace the conversation, and not let perfect be the enemy of good. Not let yourself being frozen by the fear of doing something imperfectly to not do anything at all. The other thing that we've done is approach our marketplace in relationship to how we're engaging with different consumers, understanding intersectionality. So the Belonging Advisories Board has another initiative that we're launching that's specific to understanding care and how to care for consumers. What it is that we're doing with this essentially is not using what we usually stereotypically kind of generalize our audience with, which are affinities or interests. We are reversing that. We're thinking about intersectionality and we're using in the way of identity-based targeting. And what we're doing is removing these proxies and getting into our approach to really understanding a cookieless world and getting into all the different levels of identity and how we're doing this. And we're calling this a consumer of the future. This is now a piece of product that we are rolling out on several clients, of which media spend on these clients can be upwards of 300, 400 million a year. So these are big spenders who are really looking to adopt this practice. So this is currently something that it's on its way. We're going to actually leverage this coming up here in just a few weeks. So sneak peek, but at the end of the day, we're really excited about how we're approaching this. And then lastly, I'll say is our approach on how we, to Diana's point, get this embedded into what we're doing. So we did a post-survey result going back to that brave space I mentioned. What we found was people like that we're having these conversations. They like that they're being educated, but they feel that these conversations only scratch the surface. What can we do? What can we do more? So this is going back to, as we think about the pyramid of accountability, that headstone is co-creation. So what I did is I used the respondent surveys and said, okay, you want more. How can we do more? We created what we call an ambassador program. So the ambassador program is tied back to that Belonging Advisory Board. We have embedded in every single client team and internal team a member who's directly connected to the Belonging Advisory Board, specifically coming into me. And what we're going to do is have all these folks responsible for initiating DE&I programming within the culture and fabric of their team. So this isn't a culture committee to plan happy hours. This is a culture committee to plan DE&I focused initiatives to get the conversation started. What we learned was that if we don't have these conversations in regular times, when something tragic happens, people are all the more adverse to do something about it. If you think about the amount of time that we're working in a virtual world, while we need to practice wellness, it has changed the way we work. If we're working hard and don't feel comfortable with people on our team, how can we address this? Well, these ambassadors are responsible for that. It's going to have kind of a bottom-up approach, as Diana mentioned, and kind of really, filtering that up into the policymakers, which are our Belonging Advisory Board. So it's kind of a dual-pronged approach, and we're really excited about that. And again, it's being nimble, being able to co-create, being able to hear responses, being able to listen to your consumers and your talent and figuring out what they need. The very, very, very last thing I will say on this point is we created the first ever Black Talent Summit. We have all self-identifiable Black talent come into our organization, spend an entire 2-day session specifically catered and geared towards the advancement of their careers within our organization. We created 3 separate tracks that are a 12-month-long program of curriculum specifically catered to the track. We have entry-level, mid, and senior-level leaders all invested into this in an opt-in capacity. Now, you're probably thinking, well, that's cool for people who got bandwidth. What about people who don't? We thought about that. And what we did is now we have a number of different programs that are available to people who are not in the cohort, but want to be a part of the progress. So things like panel conversations. So we're really excited about all these things, and looking forward to continuing to co-create. And, as Deanna mentioned, being able to understand how people identify is critical in moving forward in DE&I applications.
Oh my gosh, Carlos and Dan, you dropped so many good gems in the last 10 minutes. I'm trying to just sitting here take it in. I don't know how everyone else feels, but please continue to respond and react. Send your virtual snap in the chat.
Ditto.
Seriously, I can't even keep up. And I think you shared so much action and how most of your ideas started because there was a lack of representation, a lack of belonging, which we're moving towards seeing research that don't even just fully stop at DE&I, but DE&I plus B, right? What's the actual chemical output of that equation of DE&I? And I think the mention of being on a spectrum and intersectionality, and when you throw allyship in there, what does that look like, right? And for me, everyone also has echoed the work is never done. Once you start, you don't stop. It's kind of like Pringles. But my question for both of you is, what are some of the things you're working on right now for the future, or future things that you're working for at your respective companies or the other organizations that you're involved with revolving around DE&I?
You want to take that one, Diana?
Yeah, sure, no problem. I will bet all my marbles and all the wisdom I've acquired to date that, oh wait, marbles and jacks, that's fun. I will bet that the future of work is around talent mobility, and I'll explain. So I've fallen in love with this concept over the past year and a half, and I'm in amateur mode. I'm enjoying learning and immersing myself and trying new things and stumbling and reaching great success and all that. But I was reading this book this weekend. It's called That Sounds Fun. I read a book while I was on my wedding anniversary vacation for fun versus just for work. And she describes this concept of when you're a kid, you're open to trying new things. You're open to putting yourself out there. You just do it for fun. And as you become an adult, you have to get all okay, I'm super profesh, and stop trying new things. And I'd like to intersect that with what she talks about in the book is the definition of an amateur. I actually looked it up and I typed it into the chat. Is one who engages in a pursuit, study, science, or sport for fun versus a profession. And she gave examples about you go to someone's house and you see them pick flowers from the garden. I promise this is all going to make sense in 1 second. You go pick flowers from the garden and then put them in the table and it's beautiful. And somebody's like, oh, you should do flowers on the side for weddings. You're really good at this. Where people immediately go to money. And well, now you need to make money off of this thing that you do that's good versus living and enjoying it. So this concept of mobility is about investing into internal talent. And in companies like Starcom and the Walt Disney Company, there's a lot of mini companies under that. Think of even Apple, right? From Beats by Dre to this, to that, and all the different functions, right? Facebook, they have WhatsApp, they have this, they have that. So there's all this talent internal, and sometimes all these companies, they buy a lot of companies, and then people stay siloed instead of cross-pollinating that talent at scale. So what I mean by being an amateur is like, we're at the Walt Disney Company now defining what this culture of career means, and what the power of the Walt Disney Company brand around career and limitless opportunity means as we create, you know, infinite possibilities for all of our employees. It's not only be the best place to work, but a place where they feel like we're reimagining tomorrow so that we can all come together and belong and create limitless new stories and content and everything. And by that, I'll even give this example. Like, I don't know if you guys saw what we did with Marvel, ESPN, but we hosted, I'm dropping, oops, sorry, I pressed the wrong button. I'm dropping into the chat. We just hosted ESPN and Marvel debuts first ever Marvel inspired NBA night. And it was a arena of heroes, and it was an entire intersection with ESPN and Marvel. So that's two different content segments of the Walt Disney Company coming together to create something new, which is really exciting to see. And that's cross-pollinating internal talent. So giving our teams opportunities for stretch projects, for shadowing, for mentorship, for actual true sponsorship, for career swaps. Like, how cool would it be for somebody from Disney Channel to swap with somebody from Disney Cruise Lines for a week and back, and really create this, us knowing, I was inspired in our prep calls by Carlos, because he talks about redefining the consumer, redefining all their touch points and their identity. People that work at a company, you're a consumer, right? Like, and we know the next generation of talent is millennials and Gen Z, and we love experiences. We're not here for a 3-hour video to learn. We need something in 10 minutes. And then I want an immersive experience. I want to chat a little bit about it and move on, right? So creating immersion in learning and inspiring people to try new things and be a little uncomfortable and like reach that like butterfly effect of like, what if, could we, can we, question mark, instead of finite, right? Just the infinite of it. So it gets me excited about, you know, many future ESPN Marvels of, you know, just all of our brands across the Walt Disney Company coming together to co-create and lean into what the future of work looks like. And the other thing that I'd mention around looking ahead for your diversity and inclusion initiatives at your organizations and companies and nonprofits is well-being. We obviously have had an unprecedented year in so many facets, and there are people that are grieving. There are people that have family abroad that are still going through hell and back. Like, there's so much complexity in that. And you just sending a mass email to the employees saying, we stand with you, is nice. There should be more personalization at the team level. That leader should be checking in all the time. It's not just once a week, like, hey, I know there's a lot going on. How are you guys doing? Like, you know, it's creating that empathy, and the skills of inclusive leadership is going to be a must moving forward in so many companies, because creating a team culture and community around inclusion, it's the new normal. So I feel like technical skills got ahead for a bit, but now all these soft skills are coming back around empathy and understanding and judgment and decision making, and, you know, all those different things. So really think about goals that you want to set for yourself and your organization around transferable skills around inclusion, and think about your cross-pollinating talent internally and how you're giving them new opportunities and giving them access to something they know nothing about, and thinking about like, well, what should we learn from that, and then share that. So yeah, I'm literally a capital C champion for all things talent mobility. I'm obsessed, learning a lot, and now you know, getting this incredible opportunity to focus on that full time at Disney, which is, you know, a dream.
Yeah, Dana, you're already making a splash over there in your short time there, like at ESPN. Like, I'm excited to see where things go. And I love that emphasis on soft skill development. That's incredibly important. Carlos, I don't know if you want to chime in too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, all those concepts that Deanna just mentioned make a ton of sense, right? Like, I think that the idea of wellness, the idea of understanding, that people are grieving, understanding that people are in a lot of different spaces and places, really just emphasizes, to that point, where are the soft skills? How are we cultivating leader? What does it mean to address leadership? And when you're talking about a marginalized community that has not necessarily even been included in the industry, talking about leadership, it goes into a whole new, conversation. And as we think about how that conversation is going to continue to evolve, I love what you said, that this is the new normal. I mean, I feel like that was like the phrase of last year, but I think that that's just a phrase of how we're going to be moving for the next couple of years, because what we've realized in so many different ways, and how we can be in so many different places, both in a social capacity and in a virtual working capacity, and how that plays into our ability to interact means so much. And as we think about how our company is approaching that, it's really translated into a lot of different things. And one of the things I love that you just mentioned was goal setting. So what we're doing as it relates to goal setting is a completely different approach to anything we've ever done in the past. So I've worked on this rollout that we're having. It's in its alpha phase. We're about to fully beta it. But conceptually, what it is we're doing, and what it is that I've done so far, is create a mandatory. And and I want to say emphasis on mandatory, but also de-emphasizing mandates. And so what I mean by mandatory is accepting the new normal, and how we have accepted the new normal as we have transferred the idea of DE&I into all of our annual goals. And that goes from the C-suite to the entry-level employee, because at the end of the day, that's all of our responsibilities, is creating an opportunity for every single person to feel like they belong across all their intersections of identity, right? So what we have done is rewritten the entire performance conversation, and how we're having performance conversations, and our ability to make sure we're measuring and tracking what performance looks like outside of just exclusively ROI-driven goals, what you're doing on your client. We're expanding this conversation to now include this DE&I lens. So what I've been able to do is build in a feature that's now enabled on everyone's goal platform to have a checkbox. Did I include a DE&I lens? If that is not the case, then bounce back, figure it out, write something, figure out something. There's enough material here. You've been educated broadly enough to be able to come up and conceive of something. That said, we're also changing the way that performance conversations are happening. So as I mentioned, we have this huge gap and disparity around representation and inclusion in an industry. Now, how does that translate into promotion velocity? How does that translate into upward mobility? That's a very, very important topic. Well, what we've done is created a new opportunity, which is our talent advocacy program. This program actually enables non-majority talent to have an advocate in the room with them for their promotion conversations, for their annual reviews. This can be a mentor. This can be somebody who sits in different aspects of the organization. But the idea is, if you inherently have a problem on your team with diversity, inclusion, and equity, and are dealing with problems and challenges with race and ethnicity and identity, you can find yourself in a gatekeeper having too much control over one person's growth. So how do we counteract that? Well, by bringing in this mentor, by bringing in this third party, it's kind of, a watchdog that helps ensure that there is equity in the conversation. So this is a new way in which how we've approached this. And these opportunities are things that are rolling out in our 2021, 2022 goal conversations. So couldn't be more happy about it. Obviously don't have measurements in terms of how it's rolled out, but obviously we're, only midway through the year, but really, really, really excited about this and how it's translating. Right. I mentioned we're in alpha, we're bringing this now to the beta, right? Because it's now going into our mid-year conversation. So it's going to be the first time we'll be able to see it. But as it has its full rollout, the sneak peek is we're now about to incorporate the same philosophy as it relates to CSR and our ability to engage and have social involvement from our employees. So are you volunteering in your community? Are you invested as a citizen, right? Because we can't have a sense of belonging as employees and teammates if we don't even know what it means to belong societally. This is just a microcosm of what's happening outside. So we're now incorporating this volunteerism into goals as well. So it's a whole new thing that we're rolling out, and excited about it. But at this point, don't necessarily have anything to share on it outside of we got it built, it's rolling, it's there. Goals will get kicked back if we're not including the right things there. And I think that it mandates not necessarily the check boxes, but if it's not incorporated into the conversation around promotion, velocity, movement, then you're not really having the conversation, and it's truly a checkbox. So now we're making sure that simple as I would hold a salesperson to an ROI goal or a sales goal or a revenue goal, I'm holding you to this same goal. And that's where the accountability piece comes in.
Right. Yeah, accountability is so important. I love these examples. You're even seeing it kind of resonate with some of the folks here in the chat, right? You have April that says, in her organization, each employee is asked to write a DEI commitment statement of their own choosing, right? So this idea of just taking that accountability, taking the step further, but also integrating some of that personalization and your own lens, your own perspective on the topic. We're running short on time. We have about seven or 8 minutes left, and I do want to get to some of the questions. We have, between both of you, we could probably write a book right now, just based on the knowledge you've dropped. You have a blueprint and a lot of great creative suggestions on how to start taking steps towards integrating DE&I in organizations. Love the internal focus as well, beyond just looking at representation and content. What can we do within our organizations? A lot of what you said resonates across industries, right? So with that being said, I do want to get some of the questions, understanding we have about 7 minutes left. One question by Andy. Andy asks, how does Disney balance evoking, and I guess this could be for any organization too, right? On the client side, if you have a client that has a big brand history, right? So he asks, how does Disney balance evoking the company's history with pushing forward on DE&I efforts? The history seems like a strength when it comes to innovation and creativity, but might be a weakness on DE&I. So I think that's a pretty interesting question when we think of brand equity and how we sort of engage these two constraints, right? The new consumer, the future consumer, and then the brand history. I don't know if Diana can speak on any of that, or Carlos with some of your clients as well.
Yeah. So I would say that when you think of Disney, you think stories, right? You think about that feeling you get of stories from Pixar Soul to Lion King to just, all of our IP and all that the brand stands for. And I would say our nostalgia is a big driver of not just of what we've done in the past, right? And we've come open on our, public facing sites on some of the, stories we've created in the past that have contributed to negative stereotypes. And we're flagging those on our streaming platforms and, doing our best to hold ourselves accountable as well. But moving forward, if you see in our media networks business, it's now required to have 50% behind the scenes staff from various backgrounds. There's new supplier diversity policies. There's just a ton that we're doing at the foundation and core of our content creation to only make our story stronger. And I don't think that there could be a better example of the future of content of the Walt Disney Company than what we did with Chadwick Boseman. And what we built with Black Panther, and how that insanely resonated, and how that and rest in peace to him and everything. That was very hard for us at the Walt Disney Company, but being able to tell new stories, we're not just resting on stories of Lion King from the past. We're always creating new content. So I think around telling stories of intersections of diversity. So think about Dwayne Wade and Life Unexpected and his story about supporting his transgender daughter. What was that experience like to, covering the women in the WNBA bubble, and what that experience was like. We saw the tweet of their gym situation, and then that changed right away. So there's it's all of that coming together. And the other two things that I'd like to point out is, I think it's really important for everyone to know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because you can't get to belonging and actualization if somebody doesn't have toilet paper or somebody in their family passed away the day before. You're not going to resonate with them. There's a lot of emotional intelligence that happens in this work. So I really just want to make sure you guys have that. And the second thing that I'll say, tied to what other companies I think are doing in the DE&I space that I'm inspired by, LinkedIn shut down their offices for a week, and it was a mental health week. All their employees through vacation globally. Their platform closed. So that's the new expectation. And there's going to be a lot of competition with employers about workplace flexibility and working from home and the equity and all that. And, so we've obviously proved it that we can work from home during this pandemic. So those are all other things to think about, and how we push forward future creative new thinking, give people time to rest, focus on their well-being, and then they're going to show up stronger in the work, period. Danny, my love, you're on mute.
I was muted. Apologies. So we have about a few minutes left. I do want to get to as many of the questions as I can, and maybe this can be for Carlos, just for balance sake. Alicia asks, she's a creative who creates marketing content for a university. What kind of auditing or benchmarking have you developed to measure the success of DE&I initiatives? Carlos, you kind of mentioned the emphasis and emphasized that. Looking forward, I don't know if there's anything else that you could perhaps add to that.
I think there's two things. It's both qualitative and quantitative, right? And you want to be careful about how you balance that. And what we have been able to do is establish something very unique and in something that we're going to market with as well, that does a little bit of that in the way of the qualitative, but a lot of the quantitative. Because if you think about creative, a lot of it is subjective, right? As is art. So right. We had a huge emphasis on that qualitative piece. And what we did is we approached this in a way of being able to, first and foremost, identify harm. Where has harm been done? How is harm being done? And specifically through the lens of creativity and all things that's coming out of those kinds of departments, is that we got to really make sure that we have the right representation. Understanding, has someone been neglected from being included into your conversations? How do you approach that? So I think the first step is acknowledging how things may have been done incorrectly, and then fine tuning and tailoring your reapproach, your rebrand, if you will, around identifying that. Because you're remiss if you don't necessarily even account for what you've done wrong, right? You didn't apologize for it, you didn't acknowledge it. And maybe it doesn't require a formal apology, but the acknowledgement piece is imperative. And so I just say quickly, being able to understand where harm may have been done and being able to adjust accordingly and optimize your approach in a both qualitative and quantitative capacity.
My research brain is giving you a mental hug, because mixed methods, that's the way to go, man. You got to take a holistic approach to, especially to things like this. So love to hear that in terms of mixing qualitative and quantitative. Unfortunately, we are at the 6 o'clock mark on the Pacific Standard Time, but I just want to say thank you to both of you, because overall, this has been I've been a sponge. We've all been sponges, soaking in all your insight, all your just like experience. And we could probably stay here all day and all night talking about this topic further, but honestly, it's just been great to get your perspectives on such an important topic, seriously. And, we didn't get to all the questions, but, hopefully we'll be following your careers a lot closely throughout as they develop, because you all are pioneers. You're doing a lot of great work in this space. And I want to thank you, Diana and Carlos. Virtual claps to you for coming and joining us, Olivia, myself, and our virtual friends out there. So we're definitely walking away more knowledgeable. Personally, I'm inspired, I'm amped, and thinking about ways that I can sort of engage in these initiatives internally in my community. And I know many of us feel the same way. So thank you again. And to those of you out there who attended, thank you as well. It was a lot of fun. Great to see you all.
Yeah, big thank you to Olivia, Jenny, obviously yourself, Danny, obviously Diana as well, and Jessica too. So the whole squad behind stage that y'all didn't see, shout out to them.
Awesome.
Gracias. Stay safe. Big hugs to everyone. Meditate, drink water. Don't forget to breathe.
Indeed. Stay hydrated. Diana has a huge jug. Be like Diana. Hey, take care, y'all. Great seeing you all.
All right. Have a good night, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Everybody. Bye.